How you doing, guys? Today we're working on the Panzer. I know, not an RJ, but the Panzer. This is the PTO box, or power takeoff box. Some people call it an angle gearbox. This one is specific for my T50 for a couple reasons. One, it's all aluminum. There's no steel or iron like the later model ones for the T70s and the T75s. This was also obviously made in Laurel, Maryland, which was during the Copar years. And the other aspect of this gearbox that's different is the actual angle. The later gearboxes are angled in a different way because this particular angle gearbox runs in line with the motor, where the T70, I think it was even the T65s, the T65s, the T70s, the T75s, the angle gearbox runs forward or just forward of the motor. The thing that's interesting about these gearboxes is you needed them to run a mower deck or the snowblower. So really, and it didn't matter which model. You know, from my T50 all the way up to the T75. If you wanted to run a mower deck, you had to have this part. If you wanted to run the snowblower, you had to have this part, which is kind of interesting because you see a lot of Panzers for sale. There's a lot of Panzers for sale, at least up here in the Northeast. You can find at least 3 or 4 of them for sale at any point in time. Not a T50, but you know, the 70s, the 75s, and every once in a while you'll see a T65 come up for sale. But very rarely did they have this gearbox, which is kind of interesting because without the gearbox, to me, the Panzer is pretty much a useless tractor because you can't do anything unless you're going to push snow or grate some dirt. So what I need to do, as you can see, there is a lot of play in these shafts. I mean, these shafts, this one's not so bad, but it does go in and out really bad, so it's shimmed all backwards, and the bearing is obviously blown out here in the front. So there's just 4 little screws, and then the lid comes right off. And what do we have? Basically, we have a standard beveled gearbox, I guess you'd call it. I don't want to say beveled gearbox, that's kind of a simplicity thing, or Alice Chalmers thing too, but you got 2 gears, got a shaft, the motor belt goes here, you know, and then basically turns this one. I'm spinning clockwise, so it's gonna spin, you know, you go like that, and that will just, you know, spin your deck. So there was some roll pins. I wasn't gonna make a video of this, but then as I started working on it, I said, what the hell? There were some roll pins, one right here and one right there. I just got my punch and knocked them out. There is a snap ring. I don't know if you can see it. It's right there. I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to put it in my arbor press and press this shaft out, so that way, because this shaft actually passes all the way through. You can actually see that there it is right there. So I'm going to take my arbor press and press this whole thing out, so that way we can take a look at the bearings. I'm going to set this up and I'll be right back. So I got the box completely apart at this point in time. I thought I'd just kind of lay it out in a exploded parts view, so that way we can all kind of take a look at what a T50 aluminum PTO box or angled gearbox looks like. Overall, it's in really good shape. It really wasn't, it's not corroded. The bearing areas in the case look real good. I'll show that to you in a second. Wish I had looked at the parts manual or the parts breakout first before I started going to town on this thing, because it would have made it a lot easier. Namely, this front section, I thought it only had 1 bearing. It actually had 2 bearings. It had these internal C-clips holding the bearings into place. If I had known that they actually have 1 in front of the bearing and 1 in back of the bearing, 1 in front of the bearing and 1 in back of the bearing, deep down inside there, I wouldn't have had it in my press, and I was kind of pushing on it to try to get the bearing out. But luckily I didn't do it with too much force, and I finally realized that there was another retaining clip on the inside. Excuse me. So overall, the box itself's in great shape. all the race areas or the press areas look great. Even the side ones look good. Nothing that sticks out to me as an issue. There's no cracks. The bottom's real nice. The threads, I chased them. They're in real good shape. It's kind of amazing what they would do back in the day. I mean, you couldn't cast this on a mass production situation today. I mean, you know, you could do it in China, but it'd be a piece of crap. Let's be honest. I mean, here's an item that's nearly over 60 years old, and we're gonna rebuild it. What kind of angle box could you find today that's gonna be worth the damn in 60 years? I mean, give me a break. But all right, so that's that. Pretty simple layout. Here's the input pulley. This is just the engine goes to this. Turns this small shaft, which runs in this position right here. There's two bearings, as I said, that run this input shaft. The gear basically slides onto the shaft, lines up with the hole in the shaft. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to try to show it to you, but a roll pin or tension pin goes in there, holds it all together. There are some bronze shims that were on the back side of this gear that rode on the bearing. They're so worn out, and that's why there was all that play in and out in the shafts. So I'll have to get some new bronze bearings and shim it. I'll actually have to get new bearings, because part of the reason why the shafts are in such bad shape is, I mean, the bearings are literally rotted, which is kind of weird. But you know, the bearings, what happens when moisture gets into these kinds of old items. Here, look at this one. This one's completely rotted. But in any event, so input shaft goes in. This is the actual PTO, or the power takeoff portion of the box. Again, the gear slides on. Actually, it slides on in this position, like that. There's a tension pin. It rides in this position. Again, there was a series of bronze washers or spacers, bearings, thrust bearings that went here. They were completely worn out. That's why the shaft really moved. So we'll have to get some more of those. Just a stamped steel style pulley. When I took it off with the gear puller, I did ding it. Where is it? There it is, right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's got a little ding in it, so I'll just tap it down with the hammer and straighten that out. It'll be fine. The lid cleaned up real nice. I mean, again, no cracks, no nothing. Didn't even know this, learned it after I cleaned it. There's an actual breather hole right in the lid. Kind of cool. So clean that up, cleaned all the letters up. I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to repaint it. I was kind of thinking about repainting it, but I think I'm just going to leave it in its work clothes. It looks so cool just the way it is. So I'm just going to clean it up. These bearings are R12 lookalikes. So 3/4 inch shaft, an 1.125 outer. I actually had to beat the seal out of this one to get it out. Oh, actually, the seal came out of this one. So going to do that. Got to get the new bearings. So order up the 4 bearings. Oh, a couple of these clips, interesting. You know, like, look at that. It's like they're rot. And then when I used the snap ring pliers on it, it just bent and tweaked. So I got to get a couple of those, a couple set screws, and that's about it. So I'm going to order up the bearings. Probably take a couple days for them to show up, and then I'll do my next portion will be more of putting it back together, actually physically watching me putting it back together, doing some spacing, getting the shafts to line up, make sure we don't have any gear clash, and everything works out just fine. Decided to make this series on the angle box, or the PTO box, in 2 parts. I was looking at the assembly timeline. It's going to be like another 5 minutes, so I didn't want to have a big 25-minute video on how to do this angle box. So I'm just going to finish the disassembly process right now, and I'll load up part 2 on the reassembly shortly. What I've done since the last part of the video is I just took the shafts, took some 220 sandpaper, and I just shoe shined it to just get all the rust and the debris off, clean the keyway off, hit it with the file because there was a couple dings in the in the keyway, made sure that the key fits nice and smooth all the way through, cleaned the keyways on the pulleys to make sure they were all in appropriately. I did the same for the small input shaft, just cleaned it all up, filed the end just to make it nice and clean. I also took both the gears and just gave them a little bit of a sandpaper, you know, just clean this all up, clean the surface up, make sure there's no debris, clean between each of the teeth. It's interesting because the gears are actually Boston, I don't know if I can, let's see, right about there, I guess. It's about as good as I'm going to get, but it says Boston Gear Company. Yep, and a registered trademark right there. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe you can see it better on the other one. So that's kind of interesting, you know, just kind of the interesting stuff you find out about this crap. You know, yeah, the hole's actually drilled through Boston. You can see Boston on the other gear better, and it says Gear Company right there. So it's kind of neat, you know, a Boston Gear Company. I don't know if anybody knows anything about that particular gear company. Put a little comment in the bottom. I'd kind of know anything if anybody knew any history about it. Cleaned out the insides so they all go on the shafts easy. I ran over to Tractor Supply, got some new roll pins, 1/4 inch roll. These are 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 roll pins for the gears to put them back on the shafts. A couple new keys for the pulleys, and then I had to get 4 new internal ring clips. So I ran over there, same thing, Tractor Supply. I needed 4, they came in the packages of 2. I think all of it all together was like $4 or $5. I ordered the bearings off of eBay. I went to McMaster Car, and the bearing was $13.97 a piece, so it was $14. Oh, and correction, I think I made a note earlier in the thing. It's not an R12. The R12 is 1 5/8 with a 3/4 inch and a 5/16 thickness. This is 1/2 inch. So although I said 1 1/8, it is an R12 size. I misspoke earlier. It's 1 5/8, 3/4 inch bore, 1/2 inch thickness, and it's you know, it's a sealed bearing. So McMaster Car wanted $13.97, $13.79 a piece for the bearings. I was like, I think I might be able to do better. So I went on eBay and I got them for $7.99 a piece. Same load capacities, all the same baloney. I like McMaster Car. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but you know, the difference between 4 bearings, you know, $6 a piece. It's $24 cheap, and McMaster Car is evil on their shipping. They stab you hard, so I would have gotten killed on shipping. So it would have been like an absorbently more expensive route to go with McMaster Car. So I ended up getting them off eBay. They were like $7 a piece, free shipping. I mean, kind of like my comment before, you know, could you cast something like this? Probably not on a mass production line. Even the Chinese couldn't do it with quality, you know, to the quality level that this part has been made at. So just went with the eBay bearings. I'm not going to run the box hard if I even run it at all. So part 2 coming up, which is going to be a more in-depth kind of reassembly of the box itself. Okay guys, thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.